shoot the cook and save the regiment. That's what the old soldiers used to say, but the soldier of today knows that the cook's his best friend, the most important man in the army. In modern warfare, he's a key man, highly skilled and fully trained, not only in cooking, but in the art of improvisation, by means of which he's able to turn out good hot meals anywhere at any time under the most rigorous conditions of active service. In permanent camps and training centers, he finds beautifully equipped kitchens like this, with everything he wants on tap. But he can't cart this witch's cauldron around with him in the field. So let's have a look at some of the issued field cookers he must learn to use. This is petrol cooker number 1, which can turn out a hot meal for 125 men. The equipment comprises the burner unit, the stands, the containers, each holding 6 gallons in which the food is cooked, the water cans, the frying pans, and the insulators. These insulators are designed for cooking and carrying hot food wherever it may be required. The construction of the insulator is interesting. Heat is retained by an insulating packing of glass wool that is fitted into the sides, bottom, and lid. This is the packing from one side. Here's the burner unit, a compact and workmanlike job, simple in operation and easy to maintain. In appearance, it's rather like a large blow lamp. The consumption of petrol is approximately 5 to 6 pints an hour. After filling up with petrol, pump air into the fuel tank with a foot pump until the pressure is up to 30 pounds to the square inch. Disconnect the pump and light the petrol, which now sprays from the jet under pressure. Let it burn a moment. This warms the burner and vaporizes the petrol quickly. When the flame has settled down, increase the pressure to 45 pounds. Place the burner at the mouth of the trench so that the flame passes beneath the containers, which are on stands 8 inches from the ground. These cookers are ideal under active service conditions. It's early morning and the cooks are busy preparing a stew for the midday meal of the men in more forward positions. But this cooker isn't limited to the preparation of one meal. There's still room to cook breakfast for themselves. Bacon is energizer number 1 and should be cooked lightly to retain the goodness of the fat. Don't frizzle it to a cinder, just nicely warm it through. Now let's get on with that dinner. An important thing to remember is to keep the food clean and covered up, protected from flies and dirt. These boys were lucky enough to scrounge a tea chest, which makes a first-class larder. Here's the way to make a good stew. Don't chuck the meat into water and hope for the best. You won't get it. Cut it up first into steaks and fry them lightly in hot fat. That keeps the juices in and helps to break down any tough fibers. Prepare the vegetables, dice or chop your turnips and carrots. Always clean potatoes well. After placing meat and vegetables into one of the containers, add gravy. Hey, Bisto, a stew is born. Directly everything is cooking, fix the lids down and mark the containers. Stew, dumplings, vegetables, potatoes, rice, and tea. The insulators should be similarly marked. So much for the meal. The containers remain on the burner stands until cooking temperature is reached, and then they're removed and placed in the insulators, which are closed to allow cooking to continue without further use of fuel. Remember, the insulators are designed for this very purpose, that food will go on cooking in them. This meal is intended for troops some distance away and continues cooking during the journey just as well as if it were on the burner stands. You will have noticed that these containers are stoutly constructed and will stand up to the roughest roads, delivering the food at the end of the journey in perfect condition. Don't forget it was cooked some hours earlier and it's been transported some distance. But it's the same good, hot, nourishing food, so essential to maintain the fighting fitness of troops at a high standard. You can use various methods of transporting hot food to isolated posts, but this is the best way. A shoulder pack taking 2 1-gallon containers is easy to carry. Food is kept hot in the containers, because they're made on the thermos flask principle. Always keep them as clean as you can. You don't want your tea to taste of onions. So rinse them out thoroughly with hot water before the food is put in. This also warms them up, and the food will keep hot longer. The lids are made to clamp down so that the heat does not escape or the food spill during its journey. The webbing straps of the pack must be well secured because the men may have to travel over rough ground to reach the post. Milk should be carried separately. That's what he's slipping into his pocket. Now they're off for a nice, quiet country walk, but it won't be quiet long. They'll have to watch their step coming through. Their route may take them across dangerous country. There may be snipers on the lookout. Now you know why the webbing straps were securely fastened. They say an army moves on its stomach. Here it does. But only half the men manning the post can leave it at one time, so they're slipping out to a more protected spot to relax and have their meal. This type of G1098 is a general issue. Try it out regularly. One day it'll prove your best friend. Get to know all about it. Here's another type of petrol cooker, the number 3, designed to cook for a smaller number of men. It has twin burners, and it's large enough to cook most dishes. An oven is issued with the equipment. It's in the G1098 scale of some units, particularly ACAC, and cooks a hot meal for 15 men. Although it's a small oven, it has a shelf and will take a roast, like this. Tank crews present special problems. When tanks are operating away from their base, their rationed vehicles may not be in a position to follow them up closely, and the crews must therefore be self-supporting. To meet this situation, every tank crew is provided with an armored fighting vehicle pack, AFV pack for short. Let's have a deco. What have we? Sardines, milk, sugar, tea, preserved meat, baked beans, biscuits, margarine, jam. What, no spinach? But seriously, it's a jolly good selection of tasty and well-balanced foods. These boys are enjoying their AFV rations cold. That's all they've got time for. Corned beef and biscuit for one. Good God, jam on it. When you've time, cook your AFV ration on petrol cooker number 2, always carried by tanks. A good pal and a compact little job. The principle's the same as for the number 3, but there's no gauge and only one burner. But you can judge your pressure by the resistance on the plunger. It's an efficient unit, but keep an eye on the needle in the jet. If it gets bent, the spray, being restricted, produces less heat. The fault is easily remedied by unscrewing the nozzle and adjusting or replacing the bent needle. So, always keep a spare needle handy. You may keep the rest of your equipment in first-class order, but it'll let you down if the needle is faulty. Many of the items in the AFV pack can be made into appetizing little dishes. For instance, if you mash up an equal number of sardines and biscuits, what do you get? Fish cakes. Warm the sardine oil in the sardine tin first. Then tip it into the pan for frying them. Very tasty, very sweet. Another idea. Meat, beans and biscuits make a darn good stew. It's a change that goes down well for supper. Hot beans on fried biscuits are appetizing too. This little fellow, the Tommy cooker, is the smallest one issued. It carries its own solid fuel and will burn for about half an hour. All the issued cookers that you have seen have only a short life, literally a limited number of burning hours. It's up to you to spare their use and improvise on every possible occasion. Most soldiers know something about improvised cooking. These fellows have found a sheltered spot and some useful fuel. They are boiling water for tea and warming up their M&V ration. Bit of a communal kitchen idea, this. There may be occasions when this is the only way of getting a badly needed hot meal. With 2 halves of a mess tin, plus a little ingenuity, you can get a hot dish and a hot drink practically anywhere. Now for something more ambitious, building an oven. First, to give you an idea of what it's all about, let's look at a normal, well-constructed domestic range. The principles underlying its construction apply to all types. The oven chamber is insulated so that the maximum heat may be retained. The firebox may vary in position, but is always placed so that the heat circulates round the oven chamber. An escape is always provided, the flue. The importance of a really well-fitting door cannot be overstressed. You can see that much of the oven heat is wasted if the door is not a perfect fit or not properly closed. These are the important details of all ovens needing flues. Now, can we improvise an oven fulfilling these requirements? Things like these are usually lying about wherever mechanized troops happen to be. If there is a cook with you, he will at once recognize material here with which he can build an oven. An oil drum, 8 or 9 petrol tins, and bully beef tins. If none of you are cooks, watch this and remember the principle it teaches. Wind direction is important, because the drum must be broadside to the wind so that the firebox, which you will see later, is built to face it. The oil drum, which becomes our oven chamber, must be raised off the ground to enable the heat from the fire to circulate around it on its way to the chimney. Here the sergeant is marking the lines along which turf walls will be built to raise it to the proper height. Take your turfs from the oven site first. Once that is cleared, you can dig them anywhere. When the walls are about the height of a petrol tin laid on its side in the excavation, set the oven in position, the open end resting well over the wall on the right, so. The next thing is to make a firebox plate from a petrol tin, cut to shape. By the way, for a more permanent job, double it. The firebox plate performs a double duty. It is a support for the front oven insulation and later is used as a boiling or a frying plate. That's why it should be as stout and well supported as possible. Any old tin filled with earth will provide this necessary support, but remember, you will cut down draft if you use too large a tin. Even this is on the large side. Now build up the insulation tightly around the firebox side of the oven. On the other side, space is left for heat circulation. Notice how the turfs have been overlapped. This makes for greater strength and prevents loss of oven heat. The walls built, our next job is to fix the top circulation plates and connect up the flue. These tins support the plates clear of the oven top, again for heat circulation. As you see, the front plate has a piece cut out of it. This is for the chimney. We're now getting near the end of the job, and our cooks are certainly doing it properly and taking pains with the insulation. Food can be cooked quicker in a well-insulated oven, and you use less fuel than you would with a shoddy affair. Now for the chimney. This is made by cutting open the ends of petrol tins and fitting them together. Note how it's done. The thing to remember about a chimney is that it should, as far as possible, equal the length of the draft. They've made it just about right. The base of the chimney stands over the hole in the top plate, and as soon as it's fixed in position, insulation is completed with the turf laid on the top. Any small gaps between the turfs should be plugged with soil or sods. Next comes the door, our old friends, the petrol tins. two of them flattened and wired together. You remember the lesson of the ill-fitting door? See how snugly this one fits. Well, here's our turf oven. Not very difficult to make, was it? Here in diagram is what goes on inside. The arrows indicate the circulation of the hot air. That we're more concerned with. It has been insulated with petrol tins filled with sand. The principle of heat conservation is the same as the Aldershot and turf ovens, but the design, of course, always depends on local material. Even at home, sand is a useful insulator. For instance, this oven is made with sandbags. Improvised ovens will operate on almost any kind of fuel. This one is burning wood. In the same way, they may be constructed from almost any old junk or salvage. Here's a handy contraption which is quite practical and easy to make, using a petrol tin and a few small milk tins. It can be made in a few minutes and will last for several days. Now, supposing there is no wood or coal about to make your fire with, you can cook efficiently by using the oil and water method. Find some empty tins. One petrol and two small ones will do. Now, cut round the petrol tin 1 inch from the bottom. What have you got? A tray. Put it on one side. I'll tell you what to do with it in a moment. From the part of the tin left, cut a strip and bend it to make a channel down which oil and water is to flow. 2 more engineering feats like this and we're ready to light up. Make a small hole in each of the small tins, just above the bottom rim. Now plug the holes with a matchstick. You'll see the reason for this in a minute. Pour water into one tin and oil into the other. Old sump oil's the stuff. Now bore a hole in the hot plate before setting up the oil and water on a petrol tin or other suitable support. Rest your channel on the petrol tin, its end over the hot plate hole. Put the tin of oil on top of it, and then the tin of water. You can put them side by side if there's room. The tray you made goes in the firebox. This is called the flash pan. Now place a bit of oily rag in the flash pan and light it. Now wiggle those matchsticks a bit. You'll see what happens. The oil and water drip out and flow down the channel into the front half of the now heated flash pan. Adjust your matchsticks so that the oil flows thinly and evenly and the water drips into it. But oil and water don't mix. Watch. As soon as the oil meets the hot flash pan, it flames. As each drop of water hits the oil flame, it flashes. This releasing oxygen livens the lazy oil flame into a crackling furnace. The oil and water burner. Try it out. It'll work on your 72-inch range or triplex oven just as well as on the one demonstrated. Here's the same idea applied to a kettle trench, made of old petrol tins filled with earth. You can see the oil and water dripping down the makeshift channel through a hole in the hot plate to the flash pan underneath. Any number of Dixies can be kept going on this setup, and here's a smaller edition of the oil and water cooker. Any soldier can make it in a few minutes with a jackknife or a tin opener from the tins which contained his rations. Here you can see clearly the proportion of oil to water. A thin flow of oil, water drops at about 2-inch intervals. Cunning, isn't it? In the desert, water is precious, and if diesel oil's available, you can use it as a source of heat for your oven without water. Improvise again. First, cut a slot in a petrol tin. Then fill 2 small tins with diesel oil, and drop a piece of rag in each. The rag acts as a wick. Light the wick and place the burning tins inside the petrol tin. Put your mess tins on top, and Bob's your uncle. When there's no solid fuel or diesel oil to be had, it may be necessary to use petrol, but only as a last resort. Don't waste it. It's surprising what you can improvise with a petrol tin, a lump of Libya, and quite a small quantity of petrol. But notice the waste of heat, and think of the flame at night. This is a much better way. Cut out the top of a tin in the shape of an oval. A Dixie will just fit snugly into it. Put a few handfuls of dry earth or sand in the tin. Steady with the petrol, don't overdo it. And now light the fire. See how the Dixie fits into the oval opening. The close fit ensures that no heat escapes and avoids that exposed flame which might give away positions at night. It's a good all-round cooker, this. Here they are using it for making tea. Oh, and by the way, don't measure your tea in handfuls, because hands vary in size. Improvise. Make a measure from any old tin. A level measure every time makes a good standard brew. The right way is to warm the Dixie first, then put in the tea, and pour boiling water on it. Let it brew. Don't forget, if you're going to strain tea, do it before adding milk and sugar. Otherwise, some of the milk and a lot of the sugar will be removed with the tea leaves. You've learned how to get the most out of your issued petrol cookers and various methods of improvisation. One last word about petrol cookers. Always keep them clean, ready for service. Don't overwork them. Burners and jets have a life countable in hours. Learn to improvise. The moment your unit becomes static, improvise with wood or other solid fuel. If there's none, improvise with old engine oil. If that's not available, don't forget you can work wonders with diesel oil. If all you can get is petrol, remember how much you can do with your jackknife, an old petrol tin, and some earth or sand. Your unit cooks will do their best to feed you, but they may not always be with you, and you must therefore look after yourself. Many of you have already been in spots of bother where a good hot meal meant just that little bit extra that pulled you through.